brother called me 4 days before Christmas to tell me I was not welcome at the wedding. Not the groom, not my future sister-in-law, my brother, the one whose college tuition I had deferred my own graduate school to help pay. He left me a voicemail, which I think tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man he had become. His voice was flat, rehearsed, like he had practiced it in the car on the way home from her family's holiday brunch. Vivienne wants an intimate ceremony. You make things tense. It's better for everyone if you just sit this one out. I sat in my car in the parking garage of the Chicago Board of Trade building for 11 minutes after I heard it. I did not cry. I counted the support beams in the concrete ceiling until my breathing slowed. That is a habit I picked up from my job. I am a forensic accountant. I spend my days reconstructing the financial truth that people try to hide inside spreadsheets and shell companies. I follow the money until it tells me the story everyone else was too scared to read. I am very good at staying calm when other people are panicking. What I did not know yet, sitting in that cold parking garage on a Tuesday in December, was that in less than 2 weeks my brother would be calling me again. This time, he would not be calm and he would not be rehearsed. He would be standing on the curb outside a venue I had been quietly paying for, screaming into the phone that someone had just canceled the reservation. What he did not realize was that the someone was me. My name is Serena, and I am 31 years old. I work as a senior forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm that gets called in when companies suspect fraud, when estates go sideways, when divorces turn ugly and someone needs to find where the money actually went. I am methodical. I am patient. I have sat across conference tables from men twice my age who assumed I was an assistant and watched their expressions change when I laid out exactly how they had been stealing from their own partners for 6 years. I do not enjoy drama, but I understand, better than most people, that numbers never lie. For the last 8 years, I have been the number that made my family's life add up. Our parents split when my brother Kieran and I were teenagers. My mother left. My father remarried quickly, a woman with 2 kids of her own who made it clear from the first Thanksgiving that she ran a tight ship, and the ship did not have room for complicated feelings about his first family. Kieran was 12, I was 16. I watched my father reorganize his priorities in real time, the way you watch a contractor gut a kitchen, fast, efficient, and completely indifferent to what had been there before. By the time I graduated high school, I had learned one thing. If I wanted a future, I was going to have to build it myself, and I was going to have to build it fast. I took out loans. I worked nights at a hotel front desk through college. I graduated a semester early and landed a position at a firm that did estate reconciliation for high net worth divorces. I was good at it immediately, the way some people are good at reading a room. I could look at 6 months of credit card statements and tell you exactly what kind of person someone was, what they were afraid of, what they wanted, and what they were pretending they did not have. Kieran, meanwhile, had a harder time finding his footing. He floated between jobs, shared apartments with rotating cast of roommates, borrowed money with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. I did not mind helping. He was my little brother. When he called to say he was 3 months behind on rent, I covered it. When his car got repossessed, I co-signed a loan for a used Honda that I ended up paying 40% of the note on because he kept missing payments. When he decided he wanted to get his real estate license, I paid the $2,000 for the prep course and the exam fees. He passed on the 3rd attempt. I want to be clear that I did not do any of this expecting gratitude. I did it because he was family. And I believed, in the way that only an older sister can believe, that he was going to figure himself out eventually. I thought I was buying him time. I did not realize I was buying him comfort. He met Vivian at an open house he was showing in Naperville about 2 years ago. She was there with her mother, looking at the property as an investment. Kieran called me that same night. I had never heard him sound like that before, lit up in a way that made him seem 10 years younger. I was happy for him. I really was. When he asked if I could help cover the deposit on an engagement ring because he did not want to wait, I said yes without hesitating. $4,000, wired that Friday. I met Vivian at Easter. She was beautiful and poised, and she had the kind of smile that worked harder than her eyes did. Her family was from the western suburbs, old money that had thinned out over a generation, but still carried the posture of people who had never needed to ask for anything. Her mother called me Serena exactly once before switching to Kieran's sister for the rest of the afternoon, which I noted and filed away. Over the next 18 months, the wedding planning consumed everything. Vivian had specific taste. The venue she chose was a restored estate in Geneva, Illinois, a former private residence that had been converted into an event space, with original hardwood floors and a terrace that overlooked the Fox River. The rental fee for a Saturday in December was $14,000 before catering. Her parents contributed a portion. My father contributed a check that I know for a fact came partly from the joint account he shares with my stepmother, which is a whole separate audit I have never asked to open. Kieran came to me in September and told me they were $11,000 short. He did not ask directly. That was never his style. He explained the situation and then went quiet in the particular way that had meant, "I'll fix it every single time for the past decade." And I did what I always did. I told him I would figure it out. I moved money from my investment account, took a short-term hit on a position I had been holding, and wired $11,000 into the joint account he and Vivienne used for wedding expenses. I want you to hold that number in your head. $11,000 to be at a wedding. I was later told I should sit out. I also want you to know what else I had been carrying quietly for the previous 8 months. The Honda I had helped co-sign was now registered in Vivian's name, because Kieran had traded it in toward a lease on a newer model that she preferred. He had not told me about the trade-in. I found out when the financing company sent a courtesy letter to my address as the co-signer of record, notifying me that the original loan had been satisfied and asking if I wanted to be removed from the account. My name was still attached because no one had thought to ask me to sign the release. I had also, at Kieran's request, put the rehearsal dinner venue on my corporate card. He said he would reimburse me before the statement closed. That was 6 weeks before he called to tell me the wedding was intimate now. The statement closed. He did not reimburse me. $2,200 sitting on my card like a question no one wanted to answer. I drove home from that parking garage and I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water and I opened a spreadsheet. Not out of anger. I want to be precise about that. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was just what I do when I need to think clearly. I have a particular way of processing information, and it has always started with getting every number into a single document where I can see it all at once. The total came to a little over $47,000 across 8 years. That included the rent I had covered, the car loan payments, the real estate exam fees, the ring deposit, the wedding contribution, and the rehearsal dinner charge. I stared at it for a long time. $47,000 is not a fortune, but it is a down payment. It is 2 years of my retirement contributions. It is the trip to Japan I had moved to the following year, 3 times running because something always came up with Kieran. I did not feel angry looking at that number. I felt like a forensic accountant looking at evidence. And the evidence told a very clear story. I slept on it. I slept on it for 3 days actually, which is longer than I usually give myself before I decide something. On the 4th day, I picked up the phone and called the venue coordinator at the estate in Geneva. Her name was Rochelle, and she had my number on file because I was the one who had wired the $11,000. The reservation was in Kieran's name, but the payment trail ran directly through me. I explained the situation to Rochelle professionally and without editorializing. I told her there had been a change in circumstances and I needed to understand my options. She was sympathetic in the practiced way of someone who deals with exploding wedding logistics on a regular basis. She confirmed that, under the terms of the contract, the person who had provided the primary funding had co-signatory standing, something the venue required as a liability protection when large wire transfers came from a third party. I had not known that when I wired the money. I knew it now. I did not cancel the reservation that day. I want to be honest about my process. I spent another week watching to see if Kieran would call. Not to apologize necessarily, but just to acknowledge what he had done. To say something like, "Hey, I know this is strange. Let me explain. Let me fix this." Something. He did not call. He texted me once to ask if I had gotten his voicemail. When I said yes, he sent back a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. A thumbs up? I also, during that same week, had a conversation with a woman I will call a mutual acquaintance, someone who knew both Vivian's circle and mine through overlapping professional networks. She mentioned, casually and without knowing the full weight of what she was telling me, that Vivian's mother had been telling people for months that Kieran's sister was difficult, that I had a habit of making things about money, that I was the kind of person who kept score. I thought about that for a while. I thought about who had started keeping score first. I called Rochelle back on a Thursday morning 2 weeks and 1 day before the wedding. I told her I needed to exercise my co-signatory rights and request a cancellation under the clause she had described. Rochelle did not sound surprised. She walked me through the process efficiently. Under the contract terms, a cancellation at this stage forfeited 50% of the rental fee. That meant I would recover $5,500 of the $11,000. I accepted that. The $5,500 would go directly back to my account. The remaining balance was a loss I was prepared to take. What I was not prepared for was how quiet it felt to hang up the phone afterward. Not good quiet, not bad quiet. Just the particular silence of a decision that cannot be unmade. I also called the restaurant where the rehearsal dinner had been booked on my corporate card and let them know I would be disputing the charge as an unauthorized use of my account. This was technically accurate. Kieran had told me it would be reimbursed before the statement closed. It had not been, which, under the terms of how I had been discussed, the difficult sister, the one who makes things about money, I found instructive. The dispute was filed. My card was credited within 10 business days. I did not call Kieran. I did not send a long message. I did not write a letter explaining my reasoning. I had spent years being the person who explained her reasoning, only to watch it be reframed as bitterness or jealousy or difficulty. I was tired of defending math. Numbers either balance or they do not. The venue called Kieran's number the following Monday morning. I know this because he called me 40 minutes later, and for a moment I almost did not pick up. I was standing in my kitchen and running tights in a sweatshirt, making coffee, and I watched his name pulse on my screen with the particular vibration of someone who is calling because they have no other choice. I let it go to the third ring. Then I picked up. His voice was not flat or rehearsed this time. It was the voice of a person who had just discovered that the floor was not solid after all. Serena, what did you do? The venue just called. They said the reservation has been cancelled. She's completely falling apart. What is going on? I took a breath. I poured my coffee. The reservation was in my name as the co-signatory because I wired the funding, Kieran. When the circumstances changed, I exercised my rights under the contract. What circumstances? What are you talking about? You called me to tell me I was not welcome at the wedding, I said. That's the circumstance. He went silent for a moment in a way that told me he had genuinely not connected those two things. He had delivered the news and moved on, and had not for a single moment considered that I might respond. I think that is what hurt the most, not the voicemail, not the thumbs up, but the assumption that I would absorb it and continue, that the bank would take the news and stay open. That was Vivian's decision, he said finally. I was just telling you so you wouldn't show up. I know, I said, you were very clear. Serena, we have 200 people coming. Her family, our family. This is our wedding. You can't do this. You have to fix this. That phrase. I had heard it my whole life in 100 different forms, always carrying the same assumption, that my job was to absorb the damage and restore the equilibrium that other people had disturbed. You have to fix this. As though I were a utility, a load-bearing wall that had no right to object to the weight. I don't have to fix anything, I said. I kept my voice even. I was not performing calm. I genuinely felt it. The specific calm of a person who has already done the hard math and accepted the answer. The venue has my contact information, if there are questions about the contract. I've handled everything correctly. I'd suggest you call them directly and see what options you have. He kept calling. I stopped answering after the second time. He texted. His messages started out angry and progressed through several stages. Bargaining, confusion, a brief detour into telling me I was proving Vivian's family right about me, and then finally a long message at 11:30 at night that said he didn't understand when I had become someone who would do something like this. I read it twice. I thought about the Honda. I thought about the $4,000 ring deposit. I thought about the rehearsal dinner on my card, and the statement date that had come and gone without a word. I thought about the voicemail. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and went to sleep. Here's what I did not expect: the rest of the family. My father called the next morning. My stepmother called an hour after that. The message was the same from both of them: that I was being vindictive, that I was hurting Kieran, that whatever had happened between us was not a reason to blow up Christmas and the wedding and the whole family over money. Over money. As though I were the one who had made it about money. As though 8 years of quiet transfers and co-signed loans had been my idea of something other than love. I had a short conversation with my father. I told him I was not interested in being characterized as vindictive by people who had not been present for the previous 8 years of decisions that led to this moment. I was polite. I was direct. I did not raise my voice. I told him that if he wanted to help Kieran find a new venue in 2 weeks before Christmas, that was between him and his son, and I hoped it worked out. Then I blocked my stepmother's number because I had been meaning to do that for approximately 6 years, and this seemed like a reasonable time. What happened next was something I had not planned but probably should have anticipated. Vivian's mother posted something oblique on Facebook. Nothing specific, just enough. The word sabotage, a comment about family dysfunction, a reference to people who love to play victim while holding everyone hostage. Her friends commented. Her friends had friends. A cousin of Kieran's, a guy I had not spoken to since a family reunion in 2019, sent me a DM that was 3 paragraphs of judgment and 0 facts. I did not respond to any of it. I had not explained myself publicly, and I was not going to start. What I did instead was go back to my spreadsheet. I added a new column, not to calculate anything, the math was done. I added it because there was one piece of the financial picture I had not yet resolved. The corporate card dispute would take care of the rehearsal dinner. The venue cancellation had recovered half my contribution, but the ring deposit, $4,000, wired directly to a jeweler in Lincoln Park, that was a clean loss. I had no recourse there. I accepted it the way I accept any sunk cost, by looking at it clearly, naming the number, and moving on. What I did have recourse on was the car loan release. Because I was still technically a co-signer of record on a loan that had been satisfied without my formal release, the financing company owed me a signed document, removing my name from any associated liability. I called them. They confirmed that Kieran had never requested the release paperwork. I requested it myself, submitted my ID, and had the document in my email within 4 business days. It was not about money. It was about my name, my credit, the quiet exposure that comes from a decade of saying yes without reading the fine print. I sent Kieran a single text when it was done. Just the document as a PDF with a 2-line message finalized the release on the loan. Your name is clean, so is mine. He did not respond. I want to tell you about the following month, because I think it is the part of the story that people assume ends badly. Christmas was strange. My father's household had their gathering and did not invite me, which was its own kind of answer about where I stood in the hierarchy I had been funding. I spent Christmas Eve with 2 of my closest friends in a wine bar in River North, and I want to be honest with you, it was one of the better evenings I have had in recent memory. We split 3 bottles of Burgundy and talked for 4 hours, and I did not check my phone once. Kieran and Vivian rebooked the wedding. I heard this from the same mutual acquaintance who had told me about Vivian's mother's whisper campaign. They found a hotel ballroom in the western suburbs with 3 weeks' notice, which is a logistical achievement I will genuinely give them credit for. The wedding happened. I was not there. I know I was talked about. I know that in the version of events being circulated at that ballroom in December, I was the difficult sister, the one who made things about money, the one who had tried to ruin everything. I have thought about that version of me, the villain in a wedding story I was never invited to witness, and I find that I do not feel the need to correct it with everyone who heard it. The people who know me, know me. The people who decided to know Vivian's mother's version of me were not people I had been holding on to anyway. What I felt, sitting in my apartment on a Saturday night in late January, was something I want to be careful to name correctly because I have learned that precision matters, and I do not want to oversell the ending. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel healed. What I felt was clear. The particular clarity of a balance sheet that has finally been reconciled. Not to zero, because some of those numbers do not balance and never will, but to honest. The ledger was honest now. I could see exactly what everything had cost and exactly what I had received, and I was not going to keep adding entries to a column that only went one way. I reopened the folder on my desktop where I kept the transfer records. 8 years of screenshots and wire confirmations and co-sign agreements and reimbursement, promises and texts that I had screenshot as they arrived, not because I was planning anything, but because I am a forensic accountant, and that is simply how I exist in the world. I selected the entire folder. I hovered over the delete key for a moment, then I moved it to an external drive instead, because I am also someone who knows the difference between letting go and destroying evidence. But I closed the laptop, and I made myself a cup of tea. And I stood at the window of my apartment in Chicago, looking out at the lake in the last of the winter dark. And I thought about the Japan trip. I thought about it the way you think about something that has finally moved from the someday column into the actual calendar. I opened my laptop again. Not the folder. A browser tab. I looked at flights. You spend years making yourself available, making yourself useful, making yourself the person who answers when the number does not add up. And eventually, you start to wonder whether you are a person or a function, whether the people who call you when things go wrong would still call if you had nothing left to give. I know the answer to that question now. I know it because I tested it, not as an experiment. I want to be clear that I did not plan any of this as a test. It is just that when you stop making yourself available to absorb someone else's consequences, you find out very quickly what was actually keeping the relationship together. I booked the flights that night. 2 weeks in May. Tokyo first, then Kyoto, then 3 days in a small coastal town a friend had recommended, where there was a ramen shop that had been run by the same family for 40 years. I have wanted to go for 4 years. There was always something. There was always Kieran. The first thing I'm going to do when I land is find somewhere quiet and eat a meal that no one needs anything from me to pay for. And I'm going to sit with that for a little while. Because peace, it turns out, is not something you find. It is something you make room for, one canceled reservation at a time. I keep thinking about that thumbs up emoji. Not the voicemail, not the phone calls that came after, not even Vivian's mother and her Facebook post. Just that one small symbol sitting on my screen like a period at the end of a sentence that had taken 8 years to write. There is something almost clarifying about being reduced to that. When someone responds to the news that you received their message, the message that you are not welcome at a life event you quietly funded, with a single emoji, they are telling you something true. They are telling you exactly how much space you occupy in their accounting of things, and once you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. I think about what it actually took for me to get to that Thursday morning phone call to Rochelle. People hear the outcome, canceled venue, panicked brother, dispute filed, and they assume it came from anger. It did not. Anger would have been faster and messier, and would have felt very different in my chest. What it actually took was honesty. The unglamorous, private kind of honesty that happens alone at a kitchen table with a spreadsheet and no audience. I had to look at $47,000 and name it for what it was, a record of every time I had chosen someone else's stability over my own. That is not easy to do. It requires a particular kind of integrity with yourself. The willingness to stop editing your own story to make other people more comfortable inside it. And then, once you are honest about the numbers, you have to decide what to do with the information. That is the harder part. Because doing nothing is also a decision. Absorbing it and continuing would have been a decision too. And not a neutral one. I spent 8 years making that decision, and I know exactly where it led. What I had to develop. Slowly, imperfectly, in a parking garage in December with my breathing getting under control, one counted beam at a time, was the willingness to act on what I actually knew to be true, even when the action was uncomfortable, even when it cost me something, even when it made me the villain in a story being told at a ballroom I had helped pay for. That is not easy to hold. There is a version of strength that looks like endurance, staying, absorbing, continuing. I used to think that was what I was doing. I understand now that it was not strength. It was avoidance wearing strength's clothes. Real resolve, the kind that actually changes something, requires you to stop accommodating a situation that is not working and accept the consequences of stopping. I lost the ring deposit. I lost half the venue fee. I lost Christmas with my father's household, which, if I am being precise, I had been quietly losing for years already and simply had not acknowledged. What I did not lose was the trip to Japan. I booked it that same night. I leave in May. I have wanted to go for 4 years. There was always a reason not to, and the reason always had Kieran's name attached to it somewhere in the fine print. Some costs are investments, some costs are just costs. Knowing the difference is the whole game.